Hello, God bless you. My name is Reverend Prophet Joseph Aaron Priest Aqua. I want to share a message that I've entitled, Isolation is a Blessing. God isolates you for a purpose. Have you ever feel like you are all alone? That God has pulled you away from everything and everyone you once loved. This isolation can feel painful sometimes, confusing, even unbearable. But what if I tell you that this is precisely the moment when God is preparing you for something greater? What if this isolation isn't punishment but positioning? God has a pattern of separating his chosen ones before their breakthrough, setting them apart before their blessings. In moment of isolation, he is not just testing you, he is shaping you. Sometimes what feels like loneliness might be God's divine strategy to lead you into your destiny. Don't miss out on understanding why God isolates before he blesses. Isolation is one of the misunderstood phases in the believer's walk with God. Many see it as punishment, as though God has abandoned them. They ask, why, Lord, have you taken me away from everything I know, from people I love, from opportunities I once had? But what we often fail to recognize is that isolation is part of the divine process. When God pulled you away from distractions, from the noise, from the influence that might hinder the work he is doing in your life, God isolates to recalibrate, to realign, to reintroduce you to your purpose. God always uses isolation to prepare his servant for their greatest calling. Think of Moses. Before he led the Israelites out of Egypt, he spent 40 years in the desert, isolated, away from the grandeur of Pharaoh's court. It was in that place of isolation that God molded him into the leader he was called to become. It was in the desert that Moses encountered the burning bush, received divine instructions, and developed the character necessary to handle the monumental task ahead. The desert wasn't a punishment, it was a classroom for Moses. The same can be said of David. Anointed as king at young age, he didn't ascend the throne immediately. Instead, he found himself isolated, running from Saul, hiding in caves, separated from his family and his homeland. It was in these lonely places that David developed the heart of a king. His isolation wasn't abandonment, but it was an alignment. God was setting him apart, removing the noise, the distraction, and the influence that could corrupt the purity of his calling. In isolation, God is building spiritual endurance and patience. He is testing your faith sometimes, but more importantly, he is building your trust in him. If you are not ready, God's blessing can become a burden. That is why God first has to prepare us. Consider Joseph. Before he became the second most powerful man in Egypt, he experienced betrayal by his brothers and was sold into slavery. Then, just when things seemed to be looking up, he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Joseph was isolated from his family, from his culture, from his freedom. But in that place of isolation, God was working behind the scenes. Every setback was a setup for a divine comeback. In prison, God refined Joseph's character, taught him humility, and prepared him for a position of leadership he never could have imagined. The prison was not the end of Joseph's story, it was the gateway to his promotion. Isolation is often where God hides his greatest treasure, when he pulls you away from everything familiar It's because he wants to speak to you in the way you've never heard him before. He wants to show you things that can only be revealed in the stillness. Sometimes the noise of life can drown out the whisper of God's voice, but in isolation, you have no choice but to lean in and listen closely, to seek him with all your heart. And when you do, God reveals things that you never could have seen. If you had stayed in the crowd, you wouldn't have heard God in that manner. God bless you. This is word from Reverend Joseph Aqua.